Here are the instructions to complete today's virtual lab. On the agenda, you'll see the exploration instructions, which takes you to this Google Doc. You can follow this doc step by step. Here is the link to the exploration. It's a Discovery Ed exploration that looks like this. And then here is the data sheet. You only need to make one data sheet per group. So make a copy of this doc, and one person from the group submits it into Echo. Each person needs to record their work in a different color, so I can tell who is responsible for what work. Alright, so to complete this exploration, you can see here that we've got a roller coaster track, and we have two options of two different tracks. We have options to change the starting velocity, options to change the mass of the cart, and whether or not we want to add friction to our system. What kind of variables are velocity, mass, friction, and the track type? If you said they could each be independent variables, you are correct. But what do we know about independent variables? Can we change everything at once? If your answer is no, you are also correct. We can only change one of these factors at a time. So somebody in your group will use the up and down track and change the velocity. And then another person in your group could use the up and down track and change the mass of the cart. And then someone else in your group, or the partners can split it up however. Someone else will do the downhill track and change only the velocity, and someone else will do the downhill track and change only the mass of the cart. So to run this, you just set up the conditions that you want and then run it. You'll notice as the cart goes, you'll see graphs of potential energy in red, kinetic energy in blue. You can see kinetic energy hits a maximum here, our potential energy hits a minimum here, and so on. So to start recording data, you'll see that here is the up is for the up and down graph, mass of 200, up and down graph, mass of 300, and so on. The up and down graph, velocity of 8, up and down graph, velocity of 10, and so on. As you scroll through the tabs, you'll see that here, the DN, the downward track with the mass of 200, down track mass 300, etc. Down track mass velocity, down track velocity, etc., etc. So depending on which one you decide to do in your group, each person can be responsible for different pieces of this experiment. So looking at this data, I ran this trial, and look at all this data. I have information every 1/10 of a second. Who would like to record all of this data? Yeah, I didn't think so. So what data do you think you should record? Looking back at this track, what data points might be interesting if I were analyzing this data? If you said the maximum and minimums, or I guess the relative maximum and minimums, starting point max, a relative minimum, a relative maximum, a relative minimum, back to the end, you would be correct. If we're looking at the downhill graph, starting point, a relative min, a relative max, a relative min, a relative max, and the end. So if I go look at my data, I can scroll through this. So the height above the ground, here's my starting point. I would record all the way across. Now some people like to have the windows side by side. Some people like to have like a PDF and copy and paste. Whatever works for you. But I'm going to go enter this data into my data table. Okay, so there's my first trial, and this was the up and down track. The starting velocity was 8, and the mass was 200. So then I'm going to go look for the first minimum. So I scroll through my data and I look, okay, look right here at 1.34 seconds, the height goes from 6.13 to 5.83 to 5.88. So here is my minimum for the track. So I can record that value into my data table. And so on. Once I've completed collecting my data, I go back to the Explore tab and I can keep going. Before I can change any settings, I have to hit reset, and then I can change the settings that I want to change. Now, the choice to add friction, if your group chooses to add friction, make sure you stay consistent and use friction throughout the entire experiment. If your group chooses to ignore friction, that's fine too. Let me just take a look and see if there's any more instructions that need to be explained. All right, I think you got it. Good luck.